Previously on AgentPalmer.com, I finished The Voyage of the Gerald Shannara Trilogy by Terry Brooks, reviewed Out of My Mind by Kurt Sussman, and previous guest Brian J. Jones has me thinking about some larger projects. This is the Palmer Files, episode 18, with graphic designer Ryan Lynn, who has worked with Miller Lite, the NFL, and many others. We discuss those projects, plus graphic design, inspiration, illustration, balance, and of course, process. And did I mention he did my logo as well? Now you know. Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 18th episode is graphic designer Ryan Lynn. As an illustrator and graphic designer on his own, Ryan operates Ryan Lynn Design and Illustration, where his portfolio includes Miller Coors, the Carolina Panthers, and other NFL teams, plus CBS films and many more. His non-commercial portfolio, full of inspiration from the unknown depths of the sea to the farthest reaches of the universe, is nothing to scoff at either. I first met Ryan when he was working at a design agency where he was the lead designer behind the creation of my current site, AgentPalmer.com, and my logo. I know when I'm lucky by association, so it was guaranteed that Ryan was where I would and did turn to create the logo for this podcast you're listening to right now. And I told him then that one day he would be a guest on this show. Well, that day is today. And I'm excited to share this episode with you. Ryan's story is fascinating because it shows that burning the midnight oil on personal inspirations can pay large dividends, not just monetarily, but in the payoff that investing in yourself always yields. Now, before I go on to the usual show notes thing that are usually optional at best, in this case, the podcast is only half of the story. The links contained in this week's show notes include links to Ryan's portfolio and his art and illustration. And while you may know what my logo looks like, that's design. Ryan's illustrations are literally out of this world and need to be seen to be believed. Also, maybe you'll recognize some of his commercial work, but I've made it easy. All the links are available for you. All you have to do is listen and click. So, if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at The Palmer Files, and you can tweet Ryan at Ryan Lynn Design. That's RyanLynn Design. You can also see his website as well as his portfolio at RyanLynnDesign.com, which also includes his shop, and you can follow him on Instagram, also at Ryan Lynn Design, to see more of what he's got going on right now, from in progress to finished pieces. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on AgentPalmer.com, including an old text interview I did with Ryan years ago, before he went solo. And remember, all of these links and those mentioned in the show will be available in the show notes. So without further ado, let's get into it. Ryan, you are responsible for the Agent Palmer logo. This is...
And website.
And website, that's right. You were, which I still use. I will never change that.
Well, that's probably a bad move. you're gonna want to change it someday.
Well, there is a mobile version, so it's not like. But I want to let the listeners know the website prior was designed by me, and I am by no means a graphic designer. So it was just kind of a very loose, rough, notebooky like file folder desktop thing. Mm-hmm. And I was using at the time not my real face for Twitter. I was using the Michael Caine Ipcris file logo. Mm-hmm. And from those two things, which is and whatever I was writing, but the content was a little, I would presume, is slightly irrelevant. Like from Michael Caine and that crappy site I designed, you came up with that logo and that website.
Yeah.
And it was your first try. Like it wasn't.
Yeah, as I recall, we didn't have a ton of time to spend on it. We had hours, but yeah, I think it came out pretty good. We were just trying to capture everything you were about in one, we just took what you started and just made it just, more polished.
Yeah, that's, and I want to, so first of all, I still have yet to figure out what the difference is between like you and I can create the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yours will look 100 times better. And I've always been trying to figure out, like, is it because, like, Ryan adds drop shadow? No, it's not just that. Like, he adds depth. It's like, I know there's, like, little things that you go to, even if we had the same design, but there are things that you do that put it to, like, that extra level. Is it practice? Do you just see it in your mind's eye?
Yeah, probably, like, just doing it because, for so long, because, you drew a picture or draw a picture or design a website, and that's the first or maybe fifth time you've ever done that. But, I've been drawing pictures and websites and whatever for like a decade. So, I've just done it more. So like, when I was getting into design and illustration, like my first drawings were bad too. It's just, 12 years later, my first my first crack at design or a website has 12 years of experience baked into it. So I think that's probably the difference why you look like you and I look like me when we do the same thing.
Was this, you do graphic design for a living. Was this always the dream?
It's funny because I always loved art growing up and would draw all the time, and all my classes, like all my notebooks in school have all just drawings everywhere. And I always thought like, well, I'll be an art teacher because when I was a kid, that's the only thing I knew that was a job that in art was to teach it. So I thought, I'll do that. And then like, as I got older, everybody was kind of told me that, hey, like art teachers don't make a ton of money and there's not a lot of them. Each school has maybe like 2 art teachers, maybe. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, well, how do I make money doing art? And then somebody was like, oh, graphic design is a way to make money doing art. I was like, cool, I'll go to school for that. Thinking like, not even thinking like the next step or even a little further. It's just like, there we go. That's what I'll do. And then, as I was getting into it, it was like, I really gravitated towards it.
So, I mean, it was kind of, I guess, love at first sight, like, because you picked a path. I mean, is that what you went to college for that?
Yeah, I did.
So you started with a major and you finished with that major, which makes you super rare.
Yeah, that's correct. I kind of framed it to my parents because my parents have no idea. They had no idea what graphic design is, or maybe still really don't. They're just like, oh, he does something with computers, So it was just like, hey, this is like graphic design is a thing that you can go to school for. That's a job when you get out, and it has to do with art. That's what I'm going to go for. So my parents were like, okay, I guess that's, something that's like, it's not, some major where there's not like a profession that has that as a title. So yeah, that's kind of, where I ended up. And, so it's funny because a lot of my friends like went to school for art and then transferred into graphic design later because they realized like, oh no, like unless I'm an art teacher or, am really good at being an illustrator or an artist, like there's no way I'm just going to be an artist. I'm not going to graduate college and just be like, okay, here's your art job. That just doesn't, which is funny because I do that. What I do now is not necessarily what I went to school for, but I had to go to school for graphic design to end up where I am now. So
before we get to where you are now, I want to talk about, we've thrown the word art around a lot.
Okay.
So before you go to college for graphic design, what are the mediums, right? Like, is it charcoal, paint? What are the mediums for you?
Yeah, like in high school, like that's what you learn. I went to a high school that had a really good art program, and we learned like charcoal and pastels and some painting and all that stuff, like the basics. So that that's like art. And then I kind of thought like, oh, like I kind of want to be an illustrator maybe. But then my art teacher was like, whoa, your drawing and painting skills need to be excellent to be a professional illustrator. And I thought, well, I'm not good at that. So I guess, again, that's where graphic design came in, where I like, well, this is like kind of art for the rest of us, I guess, for people who can't draw so good. Or I just thought like, I'll never be a good enough to be a quote unquote illustrator.
What do you have in mind when you say illustrator? Are you talking like comic books or like?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like all that, like someone who just like comic books is like the thing that comes to mind first. Cause I can't draw, Batman very well. I mean, not like a guy who can just sit down and just bang out a Batman. Like I'm not that guy. But then you just kind of realize, like, as I went, there's different kinds of illustrators. Like, you don't have to be the guy who can bang out a Batman in 10 minutes. You can be like the guy who can draw a building really well. And like, that's what you do. Like, there's just different ways. I just didn't realize that in high school. Obviously, no one really knows.
I think when you're talking about what your teacher said, I just immediately think of Peanuts, which is not necessarily like
oh, yeah.
It's not the pinnacle of design, but like there's an illustrator who's doing it without being, I mean, I'm sure on some level it is unique, but at the same time, like that's not high art.
Yeah, but I mean, it doesn't have to, it doesn't really have to be. Art is just what, like, we can talk about an hour for just what we think art is, because that's like, anybody has their own definition of what that is. But yeah, Charles Schultz, whoever does Peanuts, like, yeah, is way good at his job. Doesn't necessarily, but he couldn't sit down and draw a Batman. Probably, maybe you could. I don't know. But so it just, you can't just look at one part of art and be like, if you can't do all these things, you're not a good artist, because an artist can be very specialized and just do one thing really well.
Do you still I don't know, I mean you're a graphic designer now, but like, do you still, I don't know, paint? Do you still get like brush off the old?
Yeah, like now I actually consider myself more of an illustrator now, which is interesting, because now I am the illustrator that I always wanted to be in high school, but I didn't actually end up going to school for it. I just have always done it, and then now that's my job now, is I do more illustration projects than anything. But yeah, to your point, I draw on a Wacom Cintiq, which is like a screen you can draw on. It's like a monitor with a pen, almost like a big iPad. Okay. It's like a second monitor, and that's what I draw on. And it's like drawing on a piece of glass, which is like, okay, you get used to it. But I did, like, for just to kind of, like you said, knock off the rust, did go back to just like marker and pencil and ink and all that, just to kind of go back to what it feels like to actually draw a line with a marker and not be able just to hit Command Z and erase it. And it's funny because now I draw on a Wacom digitally so often that I'll be sketching and I'll have my hand on my keyboard and I'll sketch something into my sketchbook in real life, and then hit Command Z on my keyboard thinking like it'll erase what I just did. I'm like, no, this is a notebook, you idiot, not a computer. So I do try to go back and do the physical stuff just to, I guess, stay fresh by using old mediums.
So let's get back on the career path. You're in college. You stay in college with the same major, which still I like that will be like, it's amazing to me because I don't know anyone who like went to school. Maybe someone who was undecided and only had one major, but so you get out and like what's there for you? What's for the taking?
Well, I got a design job right out of college, which was awesome, at an agency down near the Philadelphia area, where that was a great place to start because there we did websites and logos and brochures and all like the stuff that you do in school, but this is like the real deal now. And so you get to learn how to set up files for print and the stuff that they teach you at school, but you don't really like use it a lot until you get in the real world. So that's where I started. I just started doing graphic design for, boring stuff. Looking back on it, it's pretty boring stuff, but that, a lot of it is, a lot of design stuff is just like, we need this brochure by Friday and you just have to figure out a way to make it look cool.
Is there, I mean, you get into the real world. I knew some art students. I don't know if I ever knew a graphic design student when I was in school, but is there an equivalent of the pressure of schoolwork to the pressure of getting out in the real world and doing a client, or is it completely different?
Good question. Well, it's completely different in that you have a certain amount of time and there's like the deadline is the deadline. And there's not as much gray area as maybe in college where you're just like, I need more time, or I don't know, or I need more help or something like that, or there's people there to help you. But in the real world, like quote unquote, you have art directors and you have the client. So it's like in college, you don't necessarily have to make edits from a person who doesn't know what they're talking about. So like in the real world, you'll like show this design to like a client who doesn't know how to do graphic design or anything about graphic design, but will still tell you what they think and why they don't like something. And then you have to go back and say, well, no, this is actually really good. You don't know what you're talking about, but I have to tell you that person in a way that doesn't piss them off because they're the ones who are paying for it. So whereas in college, it's just the teacher is the only person you really have to like please, I guess.
And obviously the teacher's someone who knows design. So they're not going to be like, yeah, can you make this black line red? Come on.
Like their suggestions are like good suggestions. Whereas a client could be like, oh, you know what? Even though I told you to make it blue, my son's room is blue and I just don't like blue anymore. So it's like, okay, well, I didn't know that. Like, what am I supposed to, like, you told me to make it blue. So, that's the kind of stuff that you just don't get in school because you don't deal with those kinds of people until you get to the real world.
Okay. So first agency job, then what? Just agency to agency? Basically,
I was at the same place for like a long time because it was a small place, so you got to do a lot of different things. So this one small agency, like bigger agencies, will assign like a category, I guess, to you. So like a smaller place, you have to do a lot of things because like you'll work on logos and websites and brochures. Whereas a bigger place, you might just be the logo guy, or you might just be the brochure guy because there's just so many people. But a small place lets you get good at everything. And I just worked there and just like found the things I like to do the best. And then I would do them kind of on my own when I got home. So I got real into like gig posters and like illustrations and like screen printed posters. And like that stuff we didn't do at the agency I worked at. Like that's not something that like typical agencies do. So, but that's what I was really kind of missing in all the stuff I was interested in. Like that's the work I wasn't being able to do that I was really interested in. So when I got home, I would draw my own pictures and like I just started kind of drawing my own like prints and eventually started like getting into the screen print world. And that's kind of where I really thought like, hey, maybe I better pick this illustration thing back up because this is what I loved to do when I was in high school and before that. And then I took a break to do graphic design. And then like, why did I ever stop doing illustration? Like I should do this. So I kind of started doing that. And that's kind of where my direction then started to be like my graphic design started to kind of reflect more of my illustration until eventually my illustration just took over. And that's what I do now.
When you're at the agency and you're doing other things, like had you designed a website in college? Like, I don't want to date you, but like, at a certain point, that was...
Yeah, but they were in Flash and, like back then, like Macromedia was owned Flash and ActionScript 2 or whatever. So like that. So yes, but none of that applies now.
But you were at an agency through like the mobile first era too. So you basically had to relearn stuff that as you went along, and it changes design, every year, right?
For sure. Web design is like, even now, like I haven't designed a website in a couple of years. Even now I'd have to go back into it and kind of relearn like what everyone's doing now, just because it changes so often.
Now, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I really do. Like, what what did you not like? Mm-hmm. We'll get to you like to illustrate. Like, we'll get to that part. But like, what did you dislike? Like when it came down the pike and it was like, all right, Ryan, you have to do this. Like, what was the one thing?
What was the project?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's not so much the project that was bad. It was like whatever client. It's like, oh, you have to do a trifold brochure. And it's like, oh, cool. Like those are right. And it's like for a bank. And it's like, oh God, like a bank is just a bank. There's just no room for like stock photo. Like there's nothing. So it's a little bit of client and project. So like a trifold brochure for like a band or something, I don't know, would be really fun. Like, so you can't, so it's not like it's mostly the client, in what they want. Like if they, I don't know, boring clients don't usually want cool stuff, but sometimes, but not really.
So you now do graphic design full time.
Yep.
But you were moonlighting at it for a while. So what tipped the balance that you were like, all right, I can leave the agency and go full time with this?
I mean, full time illustration, like what I do now?
Yep.
Well, I was doing both a lot. So like, I would graphic design by day, and then by night I would come home and, make my own art prints and get them screen printed and start selling them on my, put a shop on my website, started selling them there and, people started buying them, and that eventually led to me getting noticed by some agency in Toronto that has Miller Coors as a client, specifically Miller Lite, the brand. And they were like, "Hey, we saw your posters somewhere on the internet or whatever, blogs. Are you available to do this like illustration project?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." So then I accepted like that job, and I worked on this like cool like Miller Lite illustration at night. Design websites and stuff and logos and all that during the day. And then eventually, like the Miller Lite work got to be so much that I just had to quit the design job because the illustration stuff was getting too much for me to do both.
Now, the Miller Lite campaign is what I'll call it, and there'll be links to that stuff in the show notes, like people will easily be able to click through. Does that start as like one team, or, I mean, you ended up doing it for the entire NFL?
Every NFL team that has a deal with Miller Lite. It wasn't all 32 teams. It was like maybe like 18 teams or something, which is still a lot. But actually, like before I got to the NFL, there was still a couple projects that I was doing, like just Miller Lite branded ones. They weren't team tie-in illustrations. And then when they said, "Hey, we have these like 4 NFL jobs. Do you want to do it? We want you to do it." And that's when I said, okay, well, now I need to leave the job because there's no way I'm going to pass up 4 NFL jobs. And then like, to work on, my agency job was great. Like I loved it. Like I loved the people. I still hang out with them now. And like, but I always knew that if I say no to the NFL stuff and then look back, and I'll always think like, oh man, I should have taken that job. So I thought I could always find another design job, but I might not necessarily ever be able to work on NFL again. So I took those 4 NFL jobs, quit my agency job, and then that 4 NFL jobs led into the rest of the NFL jobs. So I was like the guy who does NFL Miller Lite illustrations, which was really cool.
Yeah, and then I only know this from like following your Instagram. Did it turn into like you getting NFL gigs through the teams aside from Miller Lite?
Yeah. So that's exactly what happened. So basically I did all these teams, and then one day the Carolina Panthers needed, they wanted to do like a weekly illustration series that would be a custom illustration that like not made fun of, but like kind of threw shade a little bit at the team that they were about to play. Cause the social media voice of the Carolina Panthers is very unique and very kind of like playful and fun. So they wanted like pictures that would kind of reflect that. And they were like Miller Lite tie-ins, but they weren't necessarily sponsored by Miller Lite. They were like, the posts were sponsored by Miller Lite, but they were Carolina Panthers pictures, which is kind of a weird gray area. But then, so they were like, well, let's just get the Miller Lite guy. So they like found like, oh, this is the guy who did our Panthers picture that's everywhere down in North Carolina, and South Carolina. Let's get him. So then they called me up or emailed me and said like, hey, we need something by Sunday. And it was like Friday night. Do you think you can like, we're playing the Falcons or whoever. Do you think you can make a picture? And I was like, okay. And I was like at, having dinner with my family. And then I was like, okay, well, I have to like go now because I have to come up with this picture by Sunday. And then that turned into like, this was like week 8. So then like after that, I did like the rest of the season. And then that was 2 years ago. And then last year they had me back to do all 16 games.
Now, after that first initial call, like you have time, right? Like you can work out of the hole almost because you know what the schedule is going to be. So
right. You'd think so. Like, well, it's funny because when we did the whole year one, I knew like in the summertime, hey, this year you're doing all 16 things. It's like, cool. What I'll do is I'll do like a chunk and we'll just kind of try to stay ahead of it. And, we'll do like a chunk of 4 at a time, maybe like, cause we know, you're right. We know what the schedule is. But we also like to kind of reference what had just happened, maybe like what's going on in the week of the NFL. That's kind of the beauty of these, that they're so spontaneous. That's like, sometimes I'll reference what, Christian McCaffrey, the running back for the Panthers, had done the week before that was on SportsCenter top 10. It was like, oh, he jumped over this guy. Well, then this week I'll do like him jumping over like the bridge outside of the Steelers stadiums. So the whole thing we'll get ahead of it lasted maybe like a week or 2. And then after that, it was like, we need to come up with these this week for this week. So it was a lot of work. And by the time the bye week came around, it was a vacation for me too. Cause I was like, oh, thank God they don't need a picture this week. and then they didn't make the playoffs, which is a bummer because would have liked to have done more. But yeah, we got not behind, but it got real time real quick.
What I mean, I saw them, but I didn't see them when they were released. So let's go to week 10, right? Like the game's over. Whatever, like what's the process for coming up with week 11? So Sunday, week 10, game's over. Let's just say the Panthers win. So do you get to start on the design Monday? Do you have a call with like their social media team? Like where's the process to get 11 done
for the next week? Yeah. Well, it's not as involved as you'd think, because basically by week 11 they pretty much trusted me, and like pretty much the whole year they kind of knew, like they had very little edits, which is weird. Like they would be like, I'd send them usually 2 or 3 ideas and they'd say option 2, go with it. And they would very rarely come back to say, hey, can you move this? Can you make this bigger? Can you draw this line thicker or whatever, which was great because they pretty much just trusted me to be like, hey, you know what you're doing by now. And we love it anyway. So we don't really have a lot of edits. Plus there's not a lot of time to make edits. So the process would be, it'd be Monday and I'd be like, okay, well now I have to start thinking of, they're playing the Buccaneers, on Sunday. So I have to come up with something, maybe by Wednesday I'll send them some sketches, and then it'll take them like a day or so to kind of circulate through their bosses. And then they'd come back. The social media team is excellent there. They're so good. They'd come back and say like, we like, like I said, option 2. And I would say, great, I'll start rendering it. And then I need to have it to them by Saturday, because then it's when they schedule their posts. And usually Saturday night is when it would be posted. And it's cool because this was all Instagram series, a social media series. So I could immediately see people's reaction to the illustration, which is like nothing that's ever happened before, like in my lifetime. Like, here's a picture, it goes out to millions of people, and I can right away see if they like it or hate it. And it generally, it depended on what this Panthers schedule was, whether or not their schedule, but what their record was. So if they were winning, everybody was loving these pictures. The likes were just, the double taps were just flying in. But if they weren't winning, the comments would be like, sell the team. Like people were just not. So it depended on how they did the week before, which was how the next week was received by the fans. And that very much went into like the process of, hey, what are we doing this week? Well, they kind of got their ass kicked last week. So maybe we're not as confident or as cocky, this time. Or last year, like their quarterback was out for like the whole season. So as the year went on and they kind of realized that they weren't making the playoffs, it was like, we kind of had to kind of let up a little bit to be like, all right, like we get it. We just can't, like, we'll focus on the things that we do right and not necessarily like say, hey, we're going to kick your ass, Aaron Rodgers. Cause it's like, well, that's probably not going to happen. Maybe, I don't know. So we kind of had to be a little bit more, but when the season started and they were winning, it was like, hey, Buccaneers, we're coming to sink your ships or whatever, we did. So, but yeah, as the year went on, we kind of had to, be a little bit more mindful of what the fan reaction would be.
So you basically became, without the benefit of being on the field necessarily, like you got the crunch time. Like, I can only imagine a Monday night football game for the Panthers sets you back one day. A Thursday night game means you got to run. Like, all these things that like the actual pros deal with in terms of scheduling. You're not playing the game, but you feel those pressures.
Right. And I know it's kind of stupid because it's like, I'm like, my job is nowhere near as hard as like an NFL play. Like, they're out there like, living this and like, getting beat up and all that. And I'm just, but I still did kind of feel like a little bit of part of the team. Cause you're right. It's like Thursday. It's like, oh shit, it's a short week. Like I have even less time to do this now. And, and I'm just like the illustrator no one's heard of. Like, the team doesn't know who I am. Like the players don't necessarily, they don't know. So, but I kind of felt like, hey, I'm here too, guys. Like, I'm also here at midnight working on, just like you probably. I don't know.
So do you have a deeper appreciation for what NFL athletes go through now because you've been through some of the cycle?
Sure. I mean, like, it's not even on the same in the same universe what I do versus what an NFL player does. But like, yeah, I mean, as far as scheduling wise, like I get it, I guess.
But you didn't just do NFL teams either, though.
No, yeah, I did, like this social media thing was for the Panthers, and which is, you know, so I was doing that weekly, but I also had work, like other client work I had to do at the same time. I'm trying to like do 16 illustrations in 16 weeks. So yeah, while that was going on, I did some other teams. I did like the Lions. I did a few. Those were Miller Lite tie-ins, and the Bengals. I did a few of them too. And the Bengals, you want to talk about fan reaction and how the record of the team was. They were like 1-15, and we're trying to make, when a team is 1-15 and you're like trying to come up with a picture that's like not going to piss everybody off, but still be like, hey, we're the Bengals. Like that's when I really had to be like, okay, like how those were the harder ones to do, because like I can't be like, here's a Bengals player just like spiking a football, and then, you know, after a touchdown, because everybody would be like, this never happens, because the Bengals are 1-15. So
do the Panthers know who your favorite team is?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Like I have a pretty good relationship with them. Like you know, on a personal level too, because I would, you know, talk to these same people, and I actually ended up meeting. I got to go down to a game and met them, and they had me down there. It was great. And they're great. They're like, the social media team there is excellent. So yeah, like they definitely knew which team I liked. But you know, it's funny because I you know, I'm a hardcore Eagles fan, like ride or die. But then, you know, I very like much became a Panthers fan too. Like as this was all said and done, like, because I'm into, you know, working with them every day, and just following, like, you know, the team, what's going on, and you know, working with the actual like people behind the scenes too. It's like, it's very hard not to like become attached to it. So like, you know, I have a couple Panthers t-shirts that I wear out, which is like weird. It was like weird for me to like put on a Panthers hat and be like, what, like this is weird. Like it's just so weird, because I'm just an Eagles guy like my whole life. But so yeah, I definitely became a little bit of a Panthers fan. So they're my second. Like I bought like NFL Sunday ticket so I can like watch Panthers games too. So I guess they're like my number 2 team officially now.
You did other leagues though too, right? Like there were other sports.
Yeah, I did illustrations for like a lot of baseball teams. Like, maybe like, I think maybe 9 or 10 of them, which is not a lot, I guess, now that I think about it. But yeah, that like after the NFL series was done, Miller Lite was like, hey, now we want to do some baseball ones. So I was like, great. I didn't have as much time to do those, so I had to do those a lot faster. But I had just done like 18 Miller Lite NFL illustrations, so like the baseball ones went a lot smoother because we kind of had the process down. And I did a couple basketball ones too, and then just a couple like just brand specific ones that weren't about any team. They were just Miller Lite focused.
All of those are in the same style. So like, yeah, as you did them, did it get easier to start to finish? Like, I'm not saying like, oh, it went from 4 hours to 2, but like, did it get easier? Yeah. Because you're doing the same, you're not having to recreate a new style every time.
Yeah, it definitely got easier. I kind of helped them establish like their style that they have now. Like they had done some illustrated posters before they hired me, but like, you know, after I kind of worked with them a lot and like we did our projects, I was kind of the reference then for other artists, because they work with other artists too, because there's just so much work that they have. So, you know, I can't do it all. So they would have other people too, and they would be showing my illustrations to that, like in the briefs, like, hey, this is what they should look like. So I kind of was the guy who helped them establish their look and feel what it is today, which is really cool. So it did get easier in that like other artists had to start adapting to what I was doing. So I didn't have to, you know, kind of go far out of my comfort zone with what we had established already. So it was, it definitely got easier as it went.
Now, the style that you did for all of the Miller Lite things is not that far removed from your initial poster style.
For sure.
In fact, I still have some of the astronaut stickers that you sent. I put one on my iPad mini, and like I've been saving them because I'm like, I only have a few left. I don't know where I want to put them, but
yes. The dilemma of stickers. You never want to actually stick them on something. Yeah. So you might want to move it. What if you want to move it?
Yeah. But that initial run of moonlighting, basically, if we go back to when you were doing design work at the agency, I remember looking at the gallery when you showed it to me, and it was like a lot of outer space and underwater.
Yeah.
Where does I mean, you're an illustrator. You can do anything. You know what I mean? Like, why underwater and outer space? Why were those two captivating?
It's funny because you say that I'm an illustrator and I could do anything, but like at the time, I didn't think I could do anything. I still probably don't necessarily think I could do anything, but it was like I just like the extremes of like exploration and like going out to outer space, which is like who knows what's out there, but then also the extreme of like just going underwater, like here on Earth, like we don't have to go to outer space to find weird, crazy shit. You could just go to the ocean.
Yeah.
So like that, like on our planet. So like that definitely like I don't know. Was just a cool like just like a thing that I just like captivated my imagination of like, well, what the hell's down there? Like, we don't even know what's down there, just as much as we don't know what's out there. So that's kind of where that started. And you talk about like, oh, we can do anything. Where it's like, yeah, but back then I was like, well, I don't want to draw like a face because like faces and people are like hard to draw. So and I'm not a good illustrator, which is what I would think. Because I've always kind of thought, you're never going to talk to an artist who's like, yeah, I'm great. Like that's just not how it works. In my experience, I've just never met an artist who thought they were awesome. So it's like every artist doesn't think they're good. Even artists who are really good that like are famous still don't think they're good. You never get there. You never get to that. You never get to catch the dragon. That's what I'm going to say.
But I will flip it back. I will admit that is definitely most of the time, but there are also artists, some who do and some who don't see the value in their own work.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you see value in your own work?
Oh yeah. It's not to say that I don't like the things I do. It's just that if my kind of mindset is if I look back on a picture and I think it's, from 2 years ago, I think, wow, that's great. Like I wouldn't do anything different today. Like then you would never get better as an artist or push yourself because you're like, well, I made it. Like I have made the perfect picture. So, until that happens, like I'm never going to think I'm like, okay, I'm here. This is what I'm going to do now. Like you're always going to want to keep pushing yourself. And I think, I'll work on something that I like, send out last week. And last week I thought it was awesome. And this week I still think it's awesome, but like, oh man, if I just, if I went back, I'd probably do this a little differently, which is just something that you kind of tuck away. And that's, the next project, you remember that and then you do that and then just get better and better, hopefully.
So because you're illustrating now, full time, I'm going to ask you a question, which is, I created a video a year or two ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago, something like that. And I've talked about it on this show, actually, about, the process of doing that and learning to build a video. Mm-hmm. And when I got to the end, I had gotten so good, not so good, but better than when I started, that when I watched it, the first half was shit. And right. I had to go back and like equal the quality level.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that is that still a thing that happens for you from project to project, or do you need more time to be able to figure out like where those improvements can come from? Like, oh, I need to start highlighting this more, or, I should, like, can it happen within a project, or is it, you do so much of it so often, you need breaks and time to be able to figure those things out?
Yeah, probably breaks in time, because it kind of happens where like every day, say I'll draw all day and it'll be 5 o'clock or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, time to stop and go up for dinner. And then like, the kids go to bed and I come back down at like 8:30 and like, kind of keep working, and I'll open it up and be like, what the hell, what was I doing all day? Like, this is terrible. Just in that 2 hours of like not looking at it or whatever, you come back down and you're like, oh boy, like that, I really need to like change this horse's face or whatever. Cause horses just look weird. So yeah, like you definitely need a time to not look at it, to kind of like, I guess, reset your brain so that when you open it up again, you open up your Photoshop document and it pops up and it's like, you will immediately see something you hadn't seen all day. But for some reason, after not looking at it for 3 hours, you come back down and it's like, oh boy. Or same thing on a weekend. So it's like you do something Friday and you open it back up Monday and you kind of, open, my Photoshop icon is bouncing I'm at the bottom of my computer as it's like opening this like, 600 megabyte file. And when it's opening, I'm like, please be good. Please be good. Like, if it's been a weekend, please, like it's due this week. Please still like it when it opens. And then you open it and you think, oh, thank God. Like I still like it, which is like weird to think like that, but that's how it works. It's just like, the person you were on Friday is like not the person you are on Monday. And you hope Monday Ryan likes what Friday Ryan did.
What's the process been like agency life, I guess, is 9 to 5. I mean, it's not, sometimes it's more than that.
Yeah. Yep.
What was the transition like when you said goodbye to the agency and it was like, all right, well, I wake up in the morning and I don't have a commute anymore.
Yep.
But I'm responsible for myself now.
Yeah.
That's not just, hey, I'm working from home. That's, hey, I'm in charge of me now. Like,
right.
What?
Yep. No one's going to do it but you.
Yeah.
Yep.
What's the process? Because that can't be like goodbye to everybody on Friday, wake up Monday and I'm my own boss and all is good and right with the world. Like there's a transition, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess if I had like time to focus on the transition, maybe I would have an answer, but I was like so busy. Like I said, we had like 4 NFL pictures like out of the gate. So I didn't have time to be like, hey, what does my desk look like? Or what kind of pictures should I bring down to my basement office here? Like, it was just like, oh shit, I have to like start right away. Like, I don't have any time. I can't fuck around with, what house plant to put in my office. I need to like start. So I didn't even have to like, I didn't have time to like think of the transition because I was too busy with the work. And I kind of just, by the time I was done with all this work or I got to a stopping point, I kind of was already, I had transitioned. I didn't even know it. So, now I'm just down here all day, every day. And sometimes I get the mail every day. Every day at 3:00, I get the mail. That's what I do.
So are you, you said you come back after dinner. Like, is that a common occurrence or are you for the most part an 8? So you're not 9 to 5.
No. Well, 9 to 5. Actually, I am exactly 9 to 5 because like I'll be down here by 9. At 5:00, I hang it up for the day because I have 2 young kids, so I do need to like make sure they know who I am. So I go upstairs and do the dad thing till like when they go to bed at like 8:30, 9:00, and then I come back down. Usually I'll try to be down again by 9 p.m. and then I'll just do a few more hours depending on where I'm at in a project. Like it depends on what phase I'm in. If I'm like at the sketch phase, like I don't necessarily, for the concepting phase, I don't necessarily need to do the night shift is what I call it. The night shift part happens closer to like when the project is due, more so than like the beginning. So I'm not always down here till midnight every night because that'd be insane. I wouldn't shoot myself. But like every project does have like a midnight phase where it's like, okay, now is crunch time. So now it's the night shift time. And, I'm just kind of so used to it now and it's not that big of a deal anymore. Really, it's, I can sit at home or upstairs and watch a movie on the couch, or I can just have that same movie on in the background while I like, draw whatever the hell is I'm drawing that day. So, but trying to balance it though is definitely important. I don't forget what your question was, but whatever.
No, you got it. Do you still work-life balance is one thing, but do you still find a work pleasure balance as far as illustration? Like, do you still find time to do, the astronauts and the underwater stuff?
Not as much as I'd like to, but that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that because that means I'm busy and I'm making money, which is great. There was a time where there was like 2 or 3 weeks where I had finished, a bunch of projects and there wasn't anything on the horizon. I was like, oh God, this is it. I'm done. And I was like, at first I was like, great. Now I can like draw that picture that I've always wanted, I've had in the back of my mind that I couldn't have time to do, but I wasn't able to enjoy it because I was too worried about not having more projects to work on. So, then I got busy again and then I didn't get a chance to work on the fun stuff anymore. The personal stuff, I should say. But, now when I do have time, as long as I know I have a project in the queue, I'm able to enjoy that a lot more because I don't have to worry that like I should be out trying to find more jobs. It's like, hey, like I have a job starting in 2 weeks. So I got 2 weeks right now to draw, football players in marker, which is like a fun thing to do that I don't get to do very often in marker. So yeah, I still find time to do that, but I'd always I don't, I'd want to do more of it, but then I also don't want to do more of it because then that means I'm not busy with client work.
Do you have some I don't want to discount family, but like, do you have some downtime too?
Yeah, like between projects, like I said, if there's like a project that's not starting up till Monday, and I finished the project I'm working on now, it's Wednesday, I'll have like the rest of the week to do whatever. So yeah, there is downtime. It is nice, like being your own boss, because then I can be like, hey, you know what's really nice out right now, and it's 4:00, and I'm in a good spot with my sketch, so I'm going to just go outside now and just not come back downstairs till tomorrow. So yeah, it's there. The flexibility is nice. You got to find that balance of like you're busy and you have projects to work on, but you're not like over busy that you don't have any time for yourself. Because it's really hard to say no when you're your own illustrator, freelance illustrator. Like you don't want to ever say no to a project because they might not come back again if you say no the first time. So you're just like, yes, I can do it. Yes, I can do it. And then eventually you're like, oh no, like I've said yes so many times, or I had it all worked out on the schedule. This project would end now. This project starts when that project ends. Is perfect. But then that one project gets pushed back 3 days because Canada has some weird holiday you don't know about called Queen's Day or some shit. Because it's like I don't even know Canada had a queen, whatever. And then like that pushes the schedule back, and now there's overlap, and now I have to start a new project when I'm still working on the old one. And so yeah, you got to find that balance. But it's nice to be able to be in control of that balance. So
you sound organized. Have you always been organized?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I would say yes.
Okay. I mean, if I asked your friends and family, would they say?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, like my desktop right now on my computer is like, I have like 4 folders, and they're all. I don't have like a icon salad on my desktop. I don't know what your desktop looks like. Your desktop.
No, I got icon salad.
You got icon salad. Yeah, just by looking at you, I'm like, this is an icon salad kind of guy.
I mean, I do.
Your website's kind of like stuff everywhere.
It was on purpose. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that's your personality.
I mean, once a month I'll select it all and put it in a folder called "Clean This Up Later," and then maybe once a year I go in and I clean out those folders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty organized. People who are listening to this can't see this, but my computer, my webcam is tilted slightly, so you can't see what's going on behind me because it's just.
No, but I get to see. I get to see some. Are those full size NFL helmets or like 3/4 size?
Those are full size NFL. Wow. I have a bunch of. I bought each, like they're like replica ones. You can like they're like the ones that they wear on the field. They're like the really high, like the most expensive ones on like the Riddell website or whatever. Like it's like these are the ones we ship to the NFL teams. You can buy them too. And I bought one for each of the teams I had done the social media stuff for, which was a tax write-off, so whatever. But I bought them because for reference, because an NFL helmet is like deceptively hard to draw. Like yeah, it's just like a helmet and a face mask, but there's a lot of curves and like it's not just like a circle. Like it's a modern NFL helmet is like got a lot going on in it. But it's like jagged. It kind of looks like stealthy, and some of the face masks are crazy. So I just bought some so that way I could stop like having to try to find the perfect helmet, reference picture online. I just like bought the helmet so I could literally put them on and then like turn my head and like and light it the way I wanted it to be lit. And then like, that's my reference. So on my like front row or whatever it's called, the photo booth on my computer is just like bunches of pictures of me just standing there with an Eagles helmet on, like, looking like an idiot for reference.
You're trying to dodge a tackler that's not there.
Right, exactly. And it's so much easier to like draw like a helmet that you like set up perfectly to be the angle you wanted than to try to find one online to look at, because it's, like I said, they're really weird to look at, to draw.
So what's one kind of project you have never done that is like the next level, like that you would love to do?
That's a really good question. I always wanted to do like a sports team's logo and brand. And I have done that for like, smaller teams, but like an NFL team or an MLB team, like that would be so rad. But, I think the days of just one guy doing that kind of stuff is over. It takes like a whole team of like people at Nike to come up with like an NFL logo nowadays. But that would be like the all-time like project. But it's hard to think of that because I've already done like a picture for the Eagles, which is like the greatest thing that I'll probably ever do. That's hanging up in the stadium right now. You could go to an Eagles game and like in the background in the stadium, there's a big billboard with like the eagle I drew on it. And it's like on billboards in the city on your way to the game. You see it, it's outside, and the like banners on like the light posts when you're walking into the stadium. So like I've already done like the project that like me out of college would have thought, well, there's no other better project than that. Young me would have like died if he knew that like I get to draw a picture for the Eagles like eventually.
What about, I mean, the only thing that comes to mind for me that I will toss your way is because you've got an Avengers poster behind you. Like, would you want to do a movie poster?
Yeah, actually, I did do a movie poster already, but it was for like an indie, like back when I was doing like screen printing posters. I did like, it was like a CBS movie or something, and it was like a horror movie. It was okay. It was pretty good, but it was like a very indie production that like it's not even on Netflix, which you think, why wouldn't it be on Netflix? But so I did do a movie poster then. But yeah, for like a big budget like movie that people like actually have seen, like, that'd be awesome. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I know from our work in the past that this could go either way, but like pick a superhero universe for your dream poster.
Oh man, it's tough to think about. It's so much. It's like really anything like. Like, are we talking like, Marvel Universe or specifically Guardians of the Galaxy Universe?
No, I'm saying like pick Marvel or DC.
Definitely Marvel.
Yeah?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. There's a lot more.
Does this go back to the fact that you said at the very beginning of this show that you couldn't draw Batman?
I mean, I probably like. I
could you now?
I probably, yeah, for sure. Okay. Like it would take like I'd have to like learn how to draw. Like I could do it. Like when we talked about like. When I first started, it was like, well, I don't know how to draw anything else, so I'll draw an astronaut. But like now, like I don't know what the PDF, is going to come through with the job briefs. Like, hey, we need you to draw a horse today, and it's like, okay, well, when I first started, I used to be like, oh my god, I don't like necessarily know how to draw a horse. Like, I'm not good at drawing horses or whatever. But it's like, you gotta fucking learn how to draw a horse. You just have to do it. It's like, well, I'll say yes, and then I'll figure it out. And it's like, and then now that stigma of like, oh, I don't know how to draw X. Is like gone because it's like, well, I don't know how to draw Batman like a guy who draws Batman every day, but give me like a couple hours and I'll come up with a Batman for you. But and like we'll figure it out. But yeah, no, I couldn't just bang out a Batman like right away. That's what I meant. But I forget what your question was. But
well, it was Marvel or DC basically Marvel for your DC, movie poster.
I mean, I don't really follow DC as much. Like I know, like I love all the Marvel characters and I love Batman. But other than that, I don't give a shit about Superman.
Okay.
I don't know. Or I'm having trouble even naming other DC characters.
Well, I look forward to your Marvel work. I'm sure this podcast will definitely put you over the top.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure there's people from Marvel that listen.
We'll put it out into the universe that this guy who draws football players all day wants to draw.
I mean, the amount of difference between, say, a football player and a superhero. I mean, I've seen what you've done to Christian McCaffrey. All right, like
right. Yes,
you make him look like a superhero.
Right. Well, he already kind of looks like a superhero. Like you don't have to do much. You just have to draw him because he's, unreal. Yeah, I guess there's a lot of similarities between a football player and a superhero, like when you think about it.
Yeah.
Both strong. Both wear like uniforms. Skin tight pants.
So, if I get to tell you have a month off, you don't have to worry about projects.
Right.
And this is just for you. Mm-hmm. Do you go back to doing posters? Do you do screen prints? Like you have to do something creative, mm-hmm. but like whatever you want. And it's a month. So obviously it's not like, oh, you only have a week. Like
right.
you can do whatever you want creatively. Like where do you go? What do you do?
I probably would do more physical media stuff. So I'd go back to like pen and ink and markers and try to figure out like like what elements of that can I take and bring into like the work that I do mostly digitally, because like, a lot of people spend, they go right into digital and they spend a lot of time trying to recreate a style that's a physical medium. So it's like, oh, like I have all these Photoshop brushes that look like they're like a big thick brush and like ink. It's like, or you could just like take a big thick brush and draw it with ink, like in real life. Like, so it's like people spend so much time trying to make their digital picture look like they really did it in real life. It's like, just learn how to do it in real life. And then that'll, then you've done it. You don't have to like try to go back and make this like perfectly smooth, picture you drew on a piece of glass look like it was drawn on like paper. Like just draw it on paper. So like that's where I'm at now. I'm trying to like bring in stuff that I've done physically, like with like, because a marker looks different on paper than it does if you did like a marker brush in Photoshop. So it's like, how do you bring that over to make it look more authentic? Is just scanning. What I've been doing is just like kind of scanning in like actual pictures, and then like kind of doing digital stuff over top of it. So I'm kind of doing both. Where before I would just do start on digital and end on digital. I don't even like, maybe I'll do some sketches on my sketchbook, but like for a Miller Lite project, it's the first sketch is on the computer, because then it's just easy to send to them and it's easy to make changes, and you don't have to like erase stuff and redraw it. So it's like, so to answer your question, I'd go back to more physical drawing stuff.
Is there a show? Like, would you ever want to do like an actual art show, like take over like a room in a gallery?
Yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I've had stuff in art galleries before, but I never got to do a whole show, because that's more like a fine artist that's kind of what they do, because they have like all the work is like them and their style, whereas most of my stuff is like, someone hired me to do it. So it's my style. Yeah. But it's not, I'm not going to hang a bunch of NFL pictures in the gallery.
But you'd hang the Eagle one though. Like I feel like for you, like
I'd go to that gallery. I'd be like, oh shit, like this is awesome. But like a person who goes to art galleries is going to be like, what are all these beer posters doing here? Maybe, I don't know. That's what I think. But whereas I would love to see those, because that's what I'm into. But as far as like an art gallery, yeah, I probably need a lot more than a month to do like a full show for an art gallery, but that'd be cool.
Where do you draw inspiration now? Like, I mean, I've talked to authors who read, where do you go to like, I don't know, see other things and get inspired?
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of, surfing the internet for like, I follow artists I like, and, I have like, a couple books here of stuff I like to go through. But, as far as like where do I go? It's not so much about like I'm trying to find inspiration, because like, when I work with this commercial stuff, I'm given the concept and like a very loose sketch. So I don't really have to like be inspired to come up with like what it's going to be, but I do have to be inspired to say like, how am I going to show what they want? So it's like, oh, we want a picture of this horse running in this horse race. So I don't have to like think of, okay, this is going to be a horse, because they told me it needs to be
you're not going from the blank page. You're starting with something.
But now I have to be like, well, how do I show this horse in a dynamic way that will work on a cup? It will work on a billboard or a poster or a T-shirt, or whatever they end up doing with this stuff, in a cool perspective, And so what I get inspired a lot more with like how to execute something more though than what is that thing going to be. So I'll look at like artists who like, do something that's like very simple and like, a couple colors. And I'll be like, well, that's a great way to like do clouds. So look at that. Like those clouds look far away because they're only a couple colors or something like that. So I get inspired by like that little kind of stuff more than like, I'm just going to say Leonardo da Vinci or something. Okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like, does knowing a project is going to end up on a mug, a keychain, a poster,
Instagram account,
like everything, like does knowing it's going to be used on multiple things in media, like how much does that change what you do?
It definitely makes it like you can't do everything you want, because it does have to like be able to be reproduced at small sizes and big sizes. So it's like it has to be graphic enough that from like far away you kind of like see what it is, but also when it's blown up and put like on the side of a truck, like like you're not going to be like, oh man, like now that you look into it real close, like that eye and that eagle looks pretty weird.
How do you do that? Like, how do you do that? Like, how do you test for that in your house?
Well, I'll just like zoom in like to like 2000% or whatever. And like, and when I was doing this, like the Eagles one, I just bring that one up just because that's the one I see the most because it's where I live. Like I remember like working on like the stadium in the background. It's like the Eagles in the foreground, in the background there's a stadium, and the hash marks like when I did like this Illustrator filter to like get like a perspective, it like messed up the hash marks that like they came to a point instead of were like rectangles or something because Illustrator does it all the time. So I was like, well, I could zoom into 3000% where like I'm the only one who's ever going to notice this, or I can spend like all night drawing these hash marks like the way of this field, which is like the size of a postage stamp when you see it in real life. But then I was like, you know what? But then I will know that they're messed up. So I went in, did it, and then like later on that year, like I had gone to an Eagles game and like at the Xfinity Live Center, which is like this like bar kind of thing in the like parking lot of the stadium, they had this big like wall of like the eagle blown up really big on this like DJ booth where you could see those hash marks. And I was like, and that's why you zoom in at 3000% to do the hash marks. Cause you never know if your shit's going to be on like a DJ booth in a bar outside of the stadium. So yeah.
First things first, if you haven't already looked up Ryan's work on your own, go to the show notes and click around while I talk, because listening to Ryan's origin story is only the audible half of the story. You need to see what he has created and experience the visual half to understand the totality of everything that was discussed. And speaking of what was discussed, Ryan mentioned during the episode that he went back to illustration and asked himself why he ever stopped. And in his case, it was school and then job, the usual life stuff. But it makes me wonder, what is it that you or I have stopped that we should return to? In Ryan's case, he saw it as an opportunity to do something he was passionate about. But he was lucky in that he didn't get too far away from it, even with school and work. How many of us have strayed so far away we don't even know what we're missing? Well, for me, I knew what it was. It was playing the guitar. Now, I didn't really get rid of my guitars, so the reminder existed within wherever I was living, but they were out of sight and very much out of mind. Now, I play guitar on a regular basis, and I keep them on stands here in my office and a few other locations in my house. Yes, I have a guitar collection of sorts, but even still, I've had them for all these years, so I did get away from playing them for what was a very long time. But now I'm back at it. What is it you're missing? What should you get back to? While pondering that answer, another very important takeaway that I want to reiterate from this discussion is that perspective is important for seeing the whole picture. Whether it is a design you haven't seen in a few hours or days, or something that you've missed out on and just remembered. Perspective is a powerful tool, and it should be used with respect, because the whole rose-colored glasses thing isn't just for media like movies and music we liked back in the day that we admit isn't that good or nearly as good as we remember, but still enjoy and defend it to this day. Perspective isn't just about time, though it can be. It can also be point of view or even just motivation. I feel like other episodes will probably cover this better depending on topics and what happens, but it is worth noting that Ryan has great examples of perspective throughout this episode. But I'll admit time is the most pervasive one. And speaking of time, over the course of his getting back to illustration, Ryan went from I can't draw something to I can draw anything. It was in learning to do one and then another that he realized and came to the belief that he can learn to draw anything. This is not limited to drawing. We can all learn to do anything. Anything. We just have to be willing to admit that we don't know something and then go about filling in that gap with knowledge. What do you want to do? Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 18. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, you can tweet the show at the Palmer Files, and Ryan at Ryan Lynn Design. That's RyanLynn Design. You can see his website as well as his portfolio on ryanlynndesign.com, which also includes his shop, and you can follow him on Instagram, also at Ryan Lynn Design, to see more of what he's got going on from in progress to finished pieces. Plus, as always, don't forget you can see all of my writings on agentpalmer.com, including a text interview I did with Ryan from years ago. Remember, that site was designed by Ryan. If you're on the desktop, the mobile is completely mobilized, and yeah. The show email is thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if you have any feedback on this or any previous episode, or if there's a guest or topic you'd like me to consider. In the meantime, you can hear more of me on Our Liner Notes, a musical conversation podcast with host Chris Maier, and my other gig as co-host of the Podcast Digest with Dan Lizette. All right, Ryan, do you have one final question for me?
I do, Mr. Palmer. Before you started this podcast and you were having me concept the logo for the podcast, you were worried that maybe you weren't ready yet to start a podcast because you hadn't done, you've done enough podcasts with other people, like you're a pro, but to do your own, you didn't think you were ready yet. And I was my advice to you was, you're never ready. You just have to start doing it. Do you feel now that you're more ready now? Or do you think not that you're more ready, but do you think, hey, I'm glad I started now, because I never would have, if I just kind of waited, I never would have been ready.
It's twofold, really. I'm glad I started it when I did. And then after I started it, I kicked myself for not starting sooner. But I'm also aware that it's the same way I feel about the blog. The blog I could have started 5 years before I did. And when I started it and got it going, I was like, man, imagine where I could be if I had started 5 years ago. But it wouldn't have been the same if I hadn't have started it when I started it. So the podcast is the same way. We're I could be on episode 100 of this show.
Right.
But I started it at the right time. And, I also know that years before I started this, I was like, hey, Ryan, can you do a logo for me when it comes time? And you were like, well, what do you wait? I just remember
start now.
that's exactly what you said that first. I was like, well, come on. Well, why haven't you started it yet? And so when I actually was like, all right, no, now I'm doing it. You were like, all right, well, it's about time.
Yeah. The first ones are going to be rough, whatever. That's part of it. But you have to get those rough ones out of the way before if you always just keep waiting for the rough ones, they're always going to be there. So you got to just do them to get them out of the way. Because otherwise you're never going to be you're not just going to start the podcast and have it be excellent right away. It's going to take a couple episodes to find your format and your groove and all that.
I waited long enough to a point where I was lucky. I don't think I didn't have to wait for my format to come to me. I had to wait for my style as a host to come to me, but the format is probably always what it will be. My first solo episode was a curveball, but it's in planning this. I was like, nope, this is going to be exactly like the blog. I can do whatever the hell I want. And it was well, if I'm going to do that, I have to set it up. I can't go 52 episodes and then be like, oh, here's my first solo episode. I was like, no, I have to break the seal on that right quick. That's that's got to happen soon.
It's funny you mentioned your style and your interview style. This is essentially having a phone call with you. This is just me talking to Jason usual. Well, this is not anything.
So if we go backwards,
had to do what you do.
If we go backwards to when you were at the agency, I know I called a lot. But I also know, it was hey, Ryan, how's that design? Good. Hey, did you see the new Marvel movie?
It's the same. So it's dude, you could have been doing this the whole time, bro.
I could have recorded all those conversations and all the work stuff cut out and then,
Yep.